Security to Gate E7. We have a passenger refusing to comply. Possible federal impersonation. The voice rang out over the radio loud enough for half the terminal to hear. Passengers stopped walking. A woman gasped near the gate. And standing there, calm as a windless lake, was Naomi Elkins. Gray jeans, soft hoodie, and a rugged, dark gray backpack that looked like it belonged on a military base, not in an airport. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stood, eyes locked on the flight attendant in front of her, whose face was flushed with power. "Ma'am," said the flight attendant, her voice tightening, "I've asked you twice already. That backpack is suspicious. You're not on my clearance list. Step aside or I will have you removed." The name tag read C. Rowe. Cassie. Naomi met her gaze. "I'm on the manifest. Seat 2A. Federal clearance." Cassie snorted. "Anyone can say that? Where's your badge, your documentation?" "It's not required under Fed Clear civilian mode," Naomi replied quietly. Cassie rolled her eyes and waved over the gate supervisor. "She's holding up boarding, claims she's someone important." "Important?" Naomi said nothing. She didn't have to. Two men in first class whispered to each other. One snapped a picture. A woman further back muttered, "They're kicking her off for that bag?" And then, from seat 3A, a man in a gray suit tilted his phone, typed 6 words. "Naomi Elkins, Gate E7, confirmed presence?" He hit send and stared at Naomi like she was a glitch in the Matrix. 3 minutes earlier, everything had been normal. Naomi had arrived at the terminal early, just as she always did. No makeup, no entourage, no shiny government ID badge. That was the point of Fed Clear. Silent priority clearance for personnel working on or near critical systems, especially ones like hers. She walked quietly to the gate, her name auto-verified through biometric scan. No fanfare. That should have been it. But then Cassie Rowe had spotted her and the bag. "Is this your backpack?" she'd asked sharply, with the tone of someone expecting trouble. Naomi had nodded. "Yes, it's cleared. Doesn't look cleared to me. What's in it?" "Equipment." "What kind?" Naomi simply said, "Secure." That word alone had lit the fuse. Now, Naomi was being edged out of line, as if her bag had teeth. Cassie had clearly made a decision. This woman doesn't belong in first class, and now she wanted her gone. "Security's on the way," Cassie said, tapping her radio. "You'll need to remove yourself from this area." Naomi stared at her for a long second, then quietly stepped to the side, not because she was wrong, but because she already knew how this game played out. "Who even let her into Group 1? Cassie whispered to a co-worker, not even trying to be discreet. "Some federal intern with a printout?" The co-worker didn't reply. Naomi stood still by the wall, near Gate E7's window. Her reflection stared back at her. Calm, clean, silent. In her hand, the strap of her backpack rested like a thread connecting past and present. One that stretched all the way through 3 presidential administrations, 2 national infrastructure bills, and one system very few people even knew existed. AirVision Grid, the real-time operational dashboard for 6 of the busiest airports in the country. A system Naomi had co-designed, a system she still had full override access to. And now, someone had flagged her as a security risk, inside the very grid she architected. The irony was almost poetic. The officers arrived, 2 of them, professional, not aggressive. Yet still, they took their cues from Cassie. "Ma'am, we understand you've caused a delay." "I've said nothing," Naomi replied. One of them glanced at her boarding pass, then at the flight manifest on his tablet. His brow furrowed. Actually, she is listed under a federal clearance block." Cassie leaned over. "That must be a glitch. She didn't present any credentials." "She's not required to under Tier 3 Fed Clear," the officer replied carefully. "That comes from DC." Cassie's face stiffened. Naomi looked up. "It's fine. I'll deboard." She turned and walked without looking back. As she passed the window, a child whispered, "Mom, why are they kicking her off?" The mother didn't respond. Naomi found a seat in the waiting area. She didn't sigh. She didn't shake her head. She simply opened her phone and launched an app with no icon, no name. A blue screen flickered to life. AirVision Grid console. Internal access only, she tapped once. System status, online node. Status, 6 active airports, override level. Elkins route, level 1. Pending action, ethics flag. Authorization. She paused. One tap, and she could begin a cascade that would paralyze information flow at 6 airports, freeze 1.9B in operational signals, and trigger an FAA-led review of the airline's ethical compliance. She didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, Naomi typed a short entry into the ethics dashboard. Personnel conduct violation, Terminal E7, Staff, Cassie Rowe. Category, discriminatory. Gate conduct, Tier 2. Next action. Review lockdown protocol 14A. Back at Gate E7, boarding resumed. Cassie strutted up the jet bridge like she'd just won a lawsuit. Passengers boarded silently. A few avoided eye contact. Inside seat 3A, the man in the gray suit received a reply to his earlier message. Confirmed. Naomi Elkins holds final override for AirVision Grid. Why? He stared forward. No reason, he typed back. Just witnessed the dumbest decision of the week. Naomi sat quietly, phone in her hand, eyes on the horizon. She'd been insulted before, doubted, talked down to. But today was different. Because today, she wasn't going to just walk away. She tapped one final prompt, system integrity. Lockdown, ready, awaiting confirmation. And just before she closed the app, she whispered, only to herself, you don't disrespect the person who built the system, especially when they can shut it down. At exactly 6:44 a.m., the departures board at Gate C27 in Seattle-Tacoma International Airport blinked once, then went black. Nobody noticed right away. A woman in a red coat thought maybe it was resetting. A man on his phone didn't even look up. The gate agent tapped the keyboard, frowning, then tried again. Nothing. A minute later, Gate A2 and JFK glitched. Rows of flights disappeared mid-scroll. The gate crew went quiet. Then came Dallas Love Field, Boston Logan, Chicago O'Hare, and Phoenix Sky Harbor. Within 3 minutes, 6 of the busiest airports in the country had lost all live display functionality. Every screen showing flight departures, baggage info, gate changes, and boarding status blank. At DFW, inside the airline's control room, an analyst named Jordan threw down his headset. Okay, now it's not just a glitch, it's system-wide. His supervisor leaned over. What do you mean? 6 airports, same time, same system. That's a coordinated fail. AirVision Grid? Jordan nodded. It's not local. It's the core display feed. Back-end looks intact, but the interface is completely frozen. His screen refreshed. A blinking red banner flashed across the top. Integrity lockdown initiated. Code 14A. Admin access Elkins route. The room fell silent. At FAA HQ in Washington, D.C., a senior systems director named Marla Chen was in mid-sip of her morning coffee when her tablet vibrated. She blinked. 6 grid nodes. 112 flights delayed. Signal loss cascading. AirVision override active. She stared at the name. She knew it. Everyone in her division did. Naomi Elkins. She tapped her intercom. Get me the assistant director, now. We're not just dealing with a tech issue. This is federal. Meanwhile, back at DFW Gate E7, no one knew a thing. Cassie Rowe was already in the air, walking up and down the aisle of Flight 2E246 like a queen checking on her subjects. Passengers were half asleep or glued to their screens. She'd already forgotten about Naomi. She didn't see the gate agent below her now staring at a frozen screen, mouthing, "What the hell?" At Boston Logan, passengers were crowding the information desk. "Where's my gate?" Why is the screen blank? I have a 7:10 to Denver. Where the hell am I supposed to go? No one had answers. At Ord in Chicago, things got worse. A missing connection screen caused 2 late arrivals to sprint across terminals, only to realize they'd passed their gate twice. A child missed pre-boarding for a medical transport flight. A group of soldiers returning from deployment was misrouted. And somewhere in a quiet terminal corner at DFW, Naomi Elkins sat near a window. Her phone lay face down on the table. She wasn't watching the chaos unfold. She didn't have to. She knew how the system would respond because she'd helped build the rules. She also knew it would take them approximately 7 minutes to realize this wasn't a glitch. This was deliberate. This was ethical lockdown. Exactly 7 minutes later, Marla Chen at the FAA held up her tablet during an emergency conference call with 4 airline CEOs and 1 deputy from the Department of Transportation. "She's activated a Tier 1 lockdown," Marla said. "This isn't ransomware. This isn't external. This is a native system override." The Delta CEO scoffed. "One person shouldn't be able to do this." "She isn't just one person," Marla snapped. "She's the root engineer. The override key lives with her. That was the condition under which AirVision Grid was federally approved." United's CEO narrowed his eyes. "And remind me why she still has access?" "Because every attempt to re-centralize control failed. You needed speed and ethics compliance in one protocol. She gave you both." Another voice cut in from the DIOT line. "Is she demanding money?" "No," Marla said. "She hasn't said a word." That silenced the room. At JFK Terminal 5, a technician tried restarting one of the screens manually. No luck. A new message flashed. "Display suspended. Ethics flag triggered. See case ID 1472NE. The tech stared at the code, then pulled up the registry. When the name Naomi Elkins popped up, she froze. "Oh, we're in trouble." Inside the cockpit of Flight 2246, Captain Hayes noticed something unusual on his secondary iPad. He tapped the AirVision feed. Nothing. He tried to check baggage status. Blank. He radioed the tower. "DFW, Flight 2246. Any reason our passenger info screens are offline?" The response came back after 5 seconds of static. "Negative. Systems update. Possibly grid-related." Hayes frowned. "AirVision?" The controller didn't respond, which said everything. At FAA, the conversation shifted. Marla turned to the transportation deputy. "We have 2 options. Either we patch around Elkins's lockdown, which will take 72 hours and could cause massive delays, or we call her." At DFW, Naomi's phone buzzed once. She didn't pick it up. She already knew who was calling. Instead, she pulled her notebook out of her backpack. Not digital, not traceable. Inside, a printed copy of the ethics mandate she'd written 4 years ago. The AirScreen Federal Ethics Mandate, a 14-page document outlining minimum required standards for conduct toward passengers across race, class, gender, and ability. Rejected twice by the industry. Too idealistic, they'd said. Today, it wasn't idealism. It was leverage. 10 minutes later, her phone buzzed again. A text this time, from the FAA. "We acknowledge your system lockdown. Can we discuss resolution terms?" Naomi looked at the message, then flipped to page 1 of her mandate. She replied with 3 words. "Begin with this." In a small conference room at FAA headquarters, the 4 CEOs sat quietly as the AirScreen mandate was projected on the wall. The assistant director read the top aloud. "Passengers are not threats because of backpacks, and dignity is not negotiable." No one spoke. Back at DFW, Naomi stood up, backpack in hand. Screens were still blank. The terminal still confused. But something was shifting. Not in the system. In them. Naomi didn't look like a woman who just shut down 6 airports. She sat alone in a side terminal cafe at DFW, drinking water from a plastic cup, one elbow on the table, her old backpack still slung over the chair next to her. Around her, travelers scrambled past. Screens remained frozen. Announcements looped without context, and airline staff kept repeating, "We're experiencing technical difficulties. Please be patient." No one knew she was the reason behind the chaos, and she preferred it that way. Her phone buzzed again, FAA HQ calling. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into the side pocket of her bag and pulled out the print copy of the document she'd written 4 years ago, the AirScreen Federal Ethics Mandate. It was folded neatly, not a crease out of place. 14 pages, clear, precise, ignored by every airline exec she'd sent it to back then. But this time, they wouldn't ignore it. Across the country, inside a dimly lit FAA war room in Washington, D.C., the tension had shifted from confusion to realization. "Okay," Marla Chen said, throwing the document Naomi just sent up on the projector. "She doesn't want money. She doesn't want reinstatement. She wants this charter signed." The CEOs of Delta, United, Horizon, and Norair all stared at the first line. "No passenger shall be targeted, delayed, or removed due to assumption, attire, or possession, unless legally justified through formal risk designation." Delta's CEO leaned back. "So basically, she's angry about a rude flight attendant?" Marla raised an eyebrow. "A rude flight attendant who triggered a system-wide ethics violation flag under Tier 1 security? This isn't about her feelings. This is about protocol." United's legal counsel murmured, "She's within rights under Clause 44 of the override policy, and full indemnity." Norair's rep rubbed his temples. "So what now? We beg?" "No," Marla said. "You acknowledge." At that moment, Naomi's phone buzzed again. A different tone. Private line. FAA Ethics Division. Only a handful of people had that number. She picked up. "Ms. Elkins," said a calm voice. "This is Aaron Kirkland from FAA Compliance. I'd like to formally open communication regarding the lockdown." Naomi didn't answer at first. "Are you available to speak now?" She took a breath. "You're not the problem." "I'm aware, but I'm the one they sent." Silence. "I read your mandate," he continued. "It's well constructed. I also read the denial letters you got in 2021 and 2022. Naomi's voice was low. "And what did they say?" "Too idealistic, not scalable. Would cost too much to train entire crews on ethics metrics." "That's what I remember." Aaron paused. "But now you've made it scalable, by force." "No," Naomi corrected. "By failure. The system is functioning as designed. They're just not used to consequences." Another pause. "What's your end goal, Ms. Elkins?" Naomi's eyes didn't blink. "The same as always. Dignity, accountability, and a system that remembers." Back in the FAA room, the CEOs debated whether to push the Department of Transportation to override her authority. "She's one engineer," someone snapped. "We have legal teams." "She's not one engineer," Marla corrected. "She's the systems architect. There is no back door unless she builds it, and by the looks of it, she didn't." Meanwhile, at DFW, gate agents struggled to manually process boarding. Flight 1472 to Detroit had no gate listed. A visually impaired passenger missed boarding for a medical flight. Another was pulled out of line because of a name mismatch, a common issue Naomi had flagged 2 years ago in her ethics proposal. No one had listened. Now they were watching the system unravel in real time. Back on the phone, Aaron spoke again. "We need resolution. You've made your point." Naomi flipped a page in her mandate. "I'm not here to make a point. I'm here to set precedent." Aaron leaned forward in his chair. "Then help me understand. What's your condition?" "Sign the charter. Not tomorrow. Not after a PR disaster. Now." "You know they won't agree in 1 day. Then the system stays down." He hesitated. "You're risking public disruption." Naomi looked at the chaos outside the cafe. People pacing, confused, tired. "They're already disrupted," she said. "Not because of me, because the system was built without guardrails." Aaron sighed. "You know this could make you a target." Naomi smiled faintly. "Let them try. I've documented every piece of bias they buried for a decade. I don't need headlines. I need change. At NorAir HQ, a staffer entered the boardroom, pale. We've lost predictive routing. Our delay system's not updating, CEO. So, it means we don't know which flights will be late until they're already late. We're flying blind. Meanwhile, back at the terminal, a child clung to her father at Gate E9. He had no idea their flight had been rerouted to Terminal C, because no screen told them. They missed it. Naomi watched quietly, her hand tightened slightly on the cup. The FAA call ended with a final sentence from Aaron. If we bring the airlines to the table, will you release partial access? Naomi said, when the first signature is on the mandate. Understood. She hung up. At FAA HQ, Marla addressed the CEOs. She's giving us an option. Sign and resume flow, or fight and stay grounded. Delta's CEO. She's blackmailing us. No, Marla said. She's forcing us to look in the mirror. 30 minutes later, Naomi received a new message. Mandate, Signature 1, Horizon Airlines, confirmed. Followed by a second. Signature 2, NorAir, in process. She tapped a button. Node 1, reactivated. Partial display, resumed. Boston Logan. A few screens flickered back to life. Travelers clapped. Gate agents exhaled. Cassie Rowe, mid-flight, had no idea any of this was happening. Yet, Naomi sipped her water, watching light return to the boards in the distance. She didn't feel victorious. She felt right. There was still more to do, but for now, the system was listening. Cassie Rowe walked into the crew lounge at NorAir's Dallas operations hub, coffee in hand and a smug little bounce in her step. The overnight flight had landed 30 minutes ago. She was tired, sure, but also satisfied. Passengers had been polite. Nobody spilled anything on the seats, and she hadn't had to deal with any special cases like that woman at Gate E7. She still didn't know the woman's name. Didn't care either. Probably some over-entitled tech wannabe who got lucky with a government code. Looked too calm, too plain. Cassie hated that look, like someone who didn't need validation. She dropped her bag on a chair and plopped down at the break table. "Morning," said Brian, another flight attendant. Cassie sipped her drink. "Barely. You hear what's going on?" She raised an eyebrow. "About what? All those delays? Screens blacking out in 6 airports? Something about a grid crash." Cassie gave a little laugh. "System hiccup. Overloaded display servers. Happens every time the IT boys try to fix what ain't broken." Brian didn't look so sure. "They said it was a lockdown. Internal, not an outage." Cassie frowned. "From who?" He shrugged. "FAA's involved. Something about a federal ethics review." That made her pause. "Wait, ethics?" "Yep. Apparently one of the triggers was from our gate, E7. Cassie's grip tightened on her coffee cup, but she kept her voice even. "Probably unrelated. Maybe. Just weird timing." At the same moment, in a conference room 2 floors up, NorAir's Director of Cabin Operations, Allison Vega, stood in front of a monitor with a small group of department heads. Her tablet was open to a live document titled, Internal Notice, FAA Conduct Review Initiated Reference, Case ID 1472NE. A notification beside it blinked. "Preliminary report due in 48 hours. Allison pinched the bridge of her nose. Okay, this just became real. The airline's legal officer, Tom, leaned forward. So far, no lawsuit, no public complaint, and no external media attention. But we've been flagged, and you know what that means. "We're on record," Allison finished for him. "Exactly. And we're now in phase 1 of FAA scrutiny." Another manager cleared her throat. "So who triggered it?" Tom scrolled to the system log. "Gate E7, Flight 2246. Passenger classified under Fed Clear Tier 3. Manually removed from boarding. Report logged by Attendant Cassie Rowe." No one spoke. Allison finally said, "Rowe again." She cited suspicious equipment, said the passenger failed to present identification. Tom turned his tablet around, but the boarding pass was scanned. And the FedClear tag was verified. Allison's jaw clenched. So we removed a federally cleared passenger from a first-class seat because she looked suspicious. That's how FAA sees it, Tom said. And apparently, so does someone else. He tapped the report ID. Her name's Naomi Elkins. Back in the lounge, Cassie finished her coffee and was scrolling through Instagram when her phone buzzed. New email. Subject, Internal Conduct Review. She blinked, opened it. Dear Ms. Rowe, you are scheduled for an internal ethics interview on Friday at 10 o'clock a.m. Topic, Gate E7, Passenger Clearance and Conduct Protocol. Cassie stared at the screen, then checked again. There was no CC, no visible complaint, no name. Just a meeting. Elsewhere in the building, Allison Vega paced her office. This isn't just about Cassie, she told Tom. This is about our whole crew culture. FAA doesn't care if the incident was minor. They care that we didn't catch it. Tom nodded. And the worst part? She didn't make it a media storm. She flagged it inside the system. Quiet, precise. That's worse for us. Allison sat down hard. She used our own structure against us. Tom looked at her. Or maybe she just designed it better than us. Meanwhile, Naomi was still at DFW, seated alone, her laptop open, watching the node logs flow in. Horizon, signature confirmed. NORAIR, pending confirmation. United, under legal review. Delta, requesting revision. She scrolled past the updates. What she was watching wasn't just signatures. She was watching compliance behavior, how fast each airline moved, how transparent their language was, and whether they tried to negotiate principles. She was tracking character under pressure. That's what this had always been about. Back at NORAIR, Cassie sat stiffly as another email came in. Subject, temporary access restriction, sensitive routes. Effective immediately, crew member Cassie Rowe is restricted from international and government-contracted flights pending internal review. Her heart dropped. She clicked again. No explanation, no accusation, just consequence. Later that afternoon, Allison gathered her cabin operations team. Effective this week, she said. We are accelerating ethics recertification for all flight crews, and we will begin adopting protocols from the AirScreen draft mandate, whether we like it or not. Someone asked, "What does that mean for the review?" Allison's voice was steady. "It means we own this, and we fix it before someone else does." Cassie stood outside the glass wall of the room, watching. She couldn't hear what they were saying, but she knew. No one had called her name, but her silence was speaking louder than words now. Naomi received a final message as the sun began to set. Node 2, reconnected. ORD now partially restored. She closed the laptop. No press release, no viral video, just the system slowly fixing itself under a different set of rules. The kind she wrote, and the kind they would all follow now, whether they remembered her name or not. The conference room on the 9th floor of NORAIR's administrative building was colder than Cassie remembered. The lights were too bright. The windows were shuttered. A silver pitcher of water sat untouched in the middle of the table, and directly across from her sat two people she didn't recognize, one from legal, one from corporate compliance. This wasn't a routine chat. "Ms. Rowe," said the woman on the left, her voice steady but neutral. "Today's conversation is part of an internal review related to Gate E7, Flight 2246. Cassie nodded once, hands folded neatly in her lap. "I'd like to remind you this is not a disciplinary hearing," the man added. "But your responses will be documented." Cassie's smile was tight. "Of course, I have nothing to hide." They began with easy questions. "How long have you been with NORAIR? Have you received updated ethics training in the last 12 months? Do you remember the passenger interaction that led to removal?" Cassie answered confidently. 10 years of flight time. Yes to the ethics training. And yes, the passenger had refused to comply, carried an odd military-style backpack, refused to show proper ID, and wasn't listed properly on her manifest. She recited it like a script. The man glanced at his notes. "And you radioed for security?" "Yes," Cassie said. "Standard procedure for potential federal impersonation." The woman asked, "Was the passenger hostile?" Cassie blinked. "No." "Did she raise her voice?" "No." "Did she threaten anyone?" Cassie hesitated. "No." A beat passed. "Then what exactly made you escalate the situation?" Cassie sat back slightly, defensive. She didn't belong in first class. She didn't belong? I mean, she didn't present herself in a way that matched the clearance. The man looked up. "You mean she didn't look the part?" Cassie's jaw tightened. "I followed instinct." The woman tapped her pen against the table. "And your instinct overrode a federal clearance protocol that had already verified her identity?" Silence. Cassie didn't answer. Meanwhile, 300 miles away in Washington, D.C., Naomi Elkins sat across from two representatives from the FAA and one from the Department of Transportation. This was no longer a private dispute. This was now policy discussion. The room was quiet, serious. The FAA representative, an older woman named Dr. Helena Cruz, folded her hands. "Ms. Elkins," she said, "we'd like to formally request integration of your ethics protocol into the pre-certification audit for federal aviation partners." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That wasn't on the table yesterday." Cruz offered a small smile. "Yesterday, we thought you were bluffing. Today, 6 airports are running on manual backup." Naomi nodded once. "You read the updated draft?" "We did." "And?" The DOT rep leaned forward. "If we push this through, every major carrier will need to implement bias detection, decision logging at gate level, and accountability tracking per interaction." Naomi didn't flinch. "Yes, it will be expensive." So was ignoring it. Back at NorAir HQ, Cassie sat in silence as the compliance officer clicked a remote and brought up a silent clip of security footage. The Gate E7 incident. Naomi stood quietly in the frame. Cassie leaned toward her, lips moving sharply. Then, the moment where Naomi calmly stepped aside. No aggression, no resistance. The woman paused the clip. "This is the part where you radioed security." Cassie squirmed. "You're taking it out of context." "What context do you want us to add?" She looked trained, like military, and evasive. The man leaned forward. "She was cleared through Fed Clear. You escalated without risk indicators. And as of this morning, FAA has flagged the incident under Tier 2 bias protocol." Cassie paled. "Wait, what does that mean?" The woman replied, "It means your decision triggered a review that's now rewriting how we train 9,000 crew members." Cassie's voice cracked. "So I'm the example?" "No," the man said. "You're the evidence." In D.C., Naomi handed Cruz a hard copy of the AirScreen Federal Ethics Mandate, finalized draft. "I recommend a phased rollout," Naomi said. "Phase 1, Gate Protocol Ethics for Tier 3 clearance. Phase 2, Crew onboarding behavioral flags. Phase 3, Transparency audits." Cruz nodded. "And your condition for reactivating the system fully? All carriers must sign within 10 business days. And if they don't?" Naomi met her eyes. "They lose AirVision access, permanently." The DOT rep gave a slow whistle. "You're not playing games." "No," Naomi said. "I just stopped letting other people make the rules." Later that afternoon, at NorAir HQ, Cassie walked out of the review room with her heart pounding. She wasn't suspended, not yet, but she was restricted from long-haul flights, removed from all VIP rosters, and required to complete 3 weeks of remedial ethics shadowing. Worse, the system had logged her interaction with Naomi under a permanent crew file tag. Tier 2 Conduct Review. Resolved with training. Not eligible for supervisory path for 24 months. Cassie sat alone in her car afterward, staring at the parking lot. Not angry, not indignant, just hollow. Because the system hadn't screamed at her, hadn't fired her. It had simply closed certain doors forever. Meanwhile, Naomi exited the FAA building into the soft afternoon light. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She just walked. In her bag was a signed preliminary agreement from 3 federal agencies to review the full ethics mandate for nationwide implementation. Not bad for one quiet woman with a backpack. She crossed the street and passed a row of airline ads. Smiling faces, platinum rewards, luxury class. None of them looked like her, and that was exactly why she wrote the rules the way she did. Wednesday, 8:01 a.m. The training center inside NorAir's Houston campus buzzed with fluorescent light and the low rustle of chairs being pulled back. Cassie Rowe walked in, clutching her notebook and a paper coffee cup like armor. She scanned the room. 25 people, all crew. Some she recognized, some she didn't. A few nodded to her. 1 or 2 avoided eye contact. A slim woman in a gray cardigan stood at the front with a laptop. She smiled faintly but said nothing. Cassie slid into a seat near the back corner, second row from the last. She didn't want to be front and center. Today's session was mandatory. Ethics Protocol Tier 2. Recalibration duration, 3 hours. Instructor, not listed. Cassie sipped her coffee, trying to tune out the weight behind that word. Recalibration. 10 minutes in, the room lights dimmed. The first slide appeared on screen. White text over black. A passenger was removed from a flight. She never raised her voice. She never broke a rule. But she didn't look like she belonged. Murmurs stirred. A few people glanced around. Cassie went still. She knew what this was. The second slide rolled. Security footage. Gate E7 muted. Grainy. Timestamp visible. There she was. Cassie, clearly in uniform, standing rigid in front of a calm black woman holding a backpack. Naomi. The footage showed Cassie leaning forward, arms crossed, lips moving. Naomi stood still, then stepped back, then walked off. No sound, no protest, no resistance, only silence. Cassie's stomach knotted. No one said her name. The slide didn't mention her title, but everyone knew. The instructor spoke softly. We've edited the audio out intentionally. We're not here to dissect tone. We're here to examine instinct and the consequences of acting on it without accountability. Slide 3 came up. This is not about punishment. This is about pattern. The instructor turned back to the room. What do you see here? One man raised his hand. She looked calm, way calmer than I would have been. A woman nodded. She followed every instruction, even when it was unfair. Another. The crew assumed something based on her look. Cassie stared at her coffee. It had gone cold. The instructor paused, then clicked to the next slide. AirScreen Ethics Mandate, Section 1.2. Gate-level interaction must be recorded and reviewed when escalations occur outside formal threat assessment. This isn't just about your gut anymore, the instructor said. It's about what your gut is trained on, and if your gut only trusts people who look like you, talk like you, or carry certain bags, that's a system failure, not just personal bias. Somewhere across the city, in a windowless FAA conference room, Naomi Elkins sat quietly with a tablet in her lap. She wasn't watching the training live, but she had access. Each training session generated feedback, behavior response scores, and anonymous comment threads. It was part of the AirVision reinforcement loop she designed months ago, a tool for spotting which crews actually absorbed the lesson and which ones just nodded and moved on. She scrolled past the raw data, eyes sharp. Back in the room, the instructor stepped forward. I want to be clear. The person in this footage is not being punished, but the system is being changed because of what happened here. Cassie's face flushed hot. No name, no accusation, just a mirror. At break time, a group gathered near the coffee machine. One whispered, "Was that Cassie?" Another shrugged. They never said. Someone asked, "Who even wrote that mandate?" No one answered. A few glanced at the instructor. She smiled slightly. It was written by someone none of you noticed, but someone who noticed all of you. Meanwhile, Naomi read the internal FAA log. Mandate signatures, Horizon Norair, Skyjet United, pending Delta, reviewing terms. FAA, final ratification, scheduled Friday. One more signature and the mandate would move from optional to mandatory compliance for all federal aviation partners. A shift that would reach over 9,400 crew members, 82 terminals, and 1.9 B in system-linked performance metrics. And still, no one had spoken her name publicly. She didn't mind. At the end of the training session, the instructor handed out a folded slip of paper to each crew member. No labels, no tracking. Just one question. Have you ever watched someone be humiliated quietly and done nothing? Cassie stared at the slip for a long time, then wrote, yes, and didn't sign it. Naomi saw the data come through that night. 26 responses. 17 said yes, 6 said no, 3 left it blank. She closed her laptop. No smile, just a quiet exhale. Later that evening, as the sun dropped behind the Houston skyline, Cassie walked out to her car, training booklet tucked under one arm. She didn't feel angry. She didn't feel innocent either. She just felt like someone who'd been seen, but not called out. Corrected, but not erased. She didn't know Naomi's name, but she knew she'd never forget the way the woman stood. Still, unmoving, unbothered. Meanwhile, at an FAA press preview, a small screen behind a podium displayed the new policy rollout date. AirScreen Federal Ethics Mandate effective, July 1st. No name, no face, just the rule. And beneath it, in gray print, drafted by System Engineer, Federal Access Code Elkins Root. Only a few would know what it meant, but the ones who did would never forget it. The boardroom at DeltaVantage Airlines HQ smelled like new carpet and corporate ego. CEO Gregory Tate stood at the end of the long glass table, flipping through the printed copy of the AirScreen Ethics Mandate like it was a poorly written menu. 14 pages, he muttered. 14 pages to tell grown adults not to offend people. Across from him, DeltaVantage's legal chief cleared her throat. It's a federal-level compliance charter, Greg, not a self-help book. Greg shrugged. I've read it, twice. It's dramatic. No flight crew is going to memorize half of this. Because they're not supposed to memorize it, she replied. It's supposed to guide infrastructure, behavior logs, decision frameworks. He scoffed. It's a PR response to a single incident. We're not changing our systems because one crew member overreacted. Greg, no, he snapped. We'll wait it out. Let the others sign it. We'll join when the noise dies down. At AirVision's command center, Naomi saw it the moment it happened. DeltaVantage had missed the signature deadline. The system didn't freeze or flash a warning. It just shifted. At 6:02 a.m., all outbound routing displays for DeltaVantage at 4 participating airports began cycling in manual mode, color-coded in yellow for Unverified Ethics Protocol. At 6:14 a.m., predictive gate assignments shut down. At 6:27 a.m., priority bag coordination dropped offline. And by 6:31 a.m., DeltaVantage had vanished entirely from the primary AirVision visibility loop across 6 major airports. Not erased, just invisible to everyone. At LAX, a family waited at Gate 42C for their flight to Charlotte. The screen said, on time, but the flight had already been delayed by 45 minutes. No one told them. At DFW, a ground crew loaded luggage onto the wrong aircraft, unaware that the real flight had been reassigned 2 gates over. At Boston Logan, 3 DeltaVantage jets sat idle on the tarmac. No signal, no crew movement. The display team thought they were cleared. They weren't. Inside the ops room, a technician whispered, "Did we get locked out?" No one answered. At FAA HQ, Marla Chen stared at the red banner across the AirVision dashboard. DeltaVantage, mandate non-compliant. System access suspended. She picked up the phone. Tate didn't sign? Her assistant answered. Said the mandate was performative, that he'd rather wait. Marla didn't sigh. She simply replied, then let the system show him what it means to be optional. Greg Tate found out when his phone started blowing up with messages. What's going on with our screens at JFK? Why aren't we showing in the gate system? Are we grounded? He called it. They couldn't override. Called FAA. They said to contact AirVision. He sent a terse message to the ethics liaison. Need clarification. Is this a technical error? The reply came back in under a minute. System behavior is functioning per Mandate Protocol 4.1. Non-signatory carriers are listed as non-visible until compliance is confirmed. He stared at it. What the hell does non-visible mean? At DFW, Naomi sat in a quiet cafe, earbuds in, reviewing live system diagnostics on her tablet. Node performance, stable. Passenger flow, 91% rerouted successfully. DeltaVantage, non-visible. No redirection triggered. The system wasn't punishing, it was protecting. Passengers were being routed around weak points, just like she'd designed it. She didn't smile, didn't reply to Tate's message. She didn't need to. The system was speaking now. By 9:20 a.m., the press had caught on. DeltaVantage flights missing from airport screens? Silent suspension? AirVision Grid flags ethics holdout. 240 memos and delays linked to non-compliance with new federal mandate. Greg cursed and slammed his desk. This is sabotage. Legal shook her head. It's not sabotage. It's the infrastructure working as coded. You were warned. He jabbed a finger. We're DeltaVantage. She can't just lock us out. She didn't, the legal officer said calmly. The system did, and she's not answering because she doesn't have to anymore. By 11:12 a.m., the airline had missed 3 priority cargo deliveries, delayed 18 commercial routes, and triggered 9.4 NEM in logistical penalties across its partner contracts. Greg made the call. Send the damn signature. At 11:37 a.m., AirVision Grid updated. Mandate signature confirmed. DeltaVantage system status. Reinstating visibility. Projected sync. 12:05 p.m. No press release. No apology. Just a data line that marked the return of a company that had thought it was too big to be part of the rule. Naomi received the notification quietly. She didn't respond. She didn't comment. Just logged the behavior rating. DeltaVantage. Signature delay. Tier 3. Notes. Reactive compliance, non-proactive. She moved on. Back at FAA, Marla Chen updated her dashboard. Mandate adoption, 100% federal implementation phase 2, scheduled. She turned to her deputy. Guess what? He raised an eyebrow. You know what Elkins just did? What? She proved that you don't need to go viral to fix an industry. You just need to build a system that doesn't forget. At a small regional airport in Idaho, a flight attendant in training read the mandate for the first time. She saw the footer. Drafted by Elkins Root. She asked her trainer, "Who's Elkins?" The trainer smiled faintly. You'll never see her on the news, but if you work in this system, you'll feel her. Washington, D.C. FAA headquarters. Rows of navy blue chairs lined the auditorium. The carpet was new, the flags polished, and the podium gleamed beneath a wash of light. The room was full. Representatives from 32 airlines, executives from ESG funds, congressional observers, 2 former secretaries of transportation, and every major national media outlet. Today was the official unveiling. The AirScreen Ethics Mandate, Federal Integration Charter, a new standard, years in the making, born from one quiet incident, refined by one woman they wouldn't see today. Cassie Rowe adjusted her blazer as she took her seat in row G. It had been 5 months since Gate C27, 4 since the first training session where she saw herself on screen. Today, she wasn't a flight attendant. She was now a certified ethics trainer, contracted through FAA's Education Division. She hadn't asked for redemption, but she had worked for accountability. The name on the agenda said, Special Recognition, Contributing Authors. Cassie sat up straighter. A man approached the podium. Daniel Rivas, FAA Deputy Director for Passenger Affairs. He smiled warmly. 5 months ago, most of us thought the system worked, because it hadn't failed us personally. Then someone asked a better question. What if silence is a system, too? He let the words settle. Today, we introduce the AirScreen Ethics Mandate not just as a document, but as a foundation. One that centers dignity at every gate, on every screen, in every interaction. Applause rose. Cassie clapped too. The screen behind him lit up with the full title, AirScreen Federal Passenger Ethics Mandate. Drafted by Elkins Root Systems Architecture Implementation. Partner, FAA x Civil Rights Coalition effective. Today, Cassie blinked. Elkins. The name had appeared in every manual, every training packet, every ethics review protocol, but she'd never seen the person behind it. Rivas continued. I've been asked many times, who wrote it? I'll tell you what I know. He held up the mandate, now bound in a silver-blue cover. This was written by someone who was told to step aside and stepped forward instead. Someone who never raised her voice, but raised an entire standard. Someone who never demanded credit, only change. Another wave of applause. Cassie turned to look behind her. 2 empty chairs. A woman in a black blouse walking out quietly. She paused for half a second at the exit, didn't look back, and then disappeared. Naomi Elkins didn't need the microphone. She never wanted it. She stood in the hallway outside the auditorium, holding a badge clipped to her pocket. Visitor, Elkins. Technical advisory only. That was enough. Inside, Rivas continued. Many of you asked why we didn't list all contributing staff. We were asked to include only one name, and that name wasn't a title. It was a signature embedded in the code. Not because the author wanted recognition, but because the system needed memory. He paused. This wasn't about being seen. It was about making sure no one else is ever invisible. Cassie exhaled. She didn't know the woman who wrote the mandate, but she knew what it felt like to be changed by her. After the ceremony, a crowd gathered near the media wall. Reporters fired off questions. What airline had the most violations before the mandate? Is there any plan for international adoption? Was the original incident ever investigated? Rivas smiled but deflected. The point isn't who failed. It's how we now ensure every passenger is protected without having to go viral. A younger journalist leaned in, voice low. But seriously, who's Elkins? In another hallway, Cassie stood beside a water station, watching a live stream of the press feed from her phone. Elkins. The name rang louder now. Not because of fame, but because it had become the spine of something real. A few feet away, Naomi stood behind a pillar. She watched the same stream, not to see herself, but to confirm that the system was now moving without her push. That was the point. Her job was never to be the face of reform. Her job was to make sure the system kept its memory, even when the room forgot the moment that created it. As guests filtered out, a soft announcement came over the intercom. FAA thanks all attendees. Ethics implementation resources available outside the main doors. Shuttles to airport terminals board from Lot B. Cassie grabbed her tote bag. She stopped by the exit table and saw a new flyer printed in bold navy ink. Flight Ethics Certification begins Aug 1. Designed by Elkins Protocol Group. She smiled, folded it once, and slipped it into her bag. As Cassie walked out into the warm DC sun, a staff member held the door for her. Behind her, Naomi exited a different door, walking parallel but never intersecting. Cassie didn't turn. Naomi didn't wave. But for one brief moment, they both stood still at the same crosswalk. And then the light changed, and they walked their own directions. 3 days later, the Washington Post ran a headline: "The quiet architect behind the FAA's boldest passenger reform yet." The article praised the design, the impact, the clarity. It mentioned no interviews, no speeches, just the signature, Elkins Root. Back in Houston, Naomi returned to her apartment. She fed her plants, rebooted her firewall, reorganized her desk, then opened a fresh document on her screen. The title read, Phase 2, Cargo Ethics and Contractor Bias. Preliminary framework. She didn't need applause. She needed continuity. In a smaller window in the corner of her screen, security cam footage from a training center played. Cassie, now leading a discussion. Standing tall, voice steady. Asking the group, what does it cost to be silent when someone else is humiliated? No one had an easy answer, and that's why they were there. Naomi leaned back, hands folded behind her head. Not famous, not forgotten, not needed in the room, because her code already was. Chicago O'Hare, Gate C27. Maya Whitmore, 42, stood quietly in line at the gate, holding a small carry-on and a brown leather messenger bag slung over one shoulder. She was flying home to Denver after a week-long legal symposium in D.C., still dressed in her navy blue slacks and crisp blouse from the closing panel. She had no entourage, no flashy luggage, no dramatic presence. Just grace. She also had a diamond federal clearance ID tucked behind her boarding pass, but the agent didn't even glance at it. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step aside. There's a security tag on your bag." Maya blinked. A tag? The agent, young, flustered, pointed at the strap of her bag. "Looks like extra wiring, and the system just flagged it as non-standard." Maya remained calm. "It's a charging cable for my medical laptop. I'm a DOJ compliance officer." The woman didn't back down. "I'm going to need to call secondary screening." That's when it happened. The AirScreen node, installed behind the counter, silently blinked red. At that exact moment, 3 things occurred. The on-duty supervisor's tablet vibrated with a priority alert. Ethics breach potential, passenger profile conflict, Fed tier clearance. The gate camera zoomed and initiated automated documentation of the incident, with voice-triggered transcription starting. The airline crew's tablets on board Flight 908 lit up with a real-time notice. Passenger flagged at Gate C27. System suggests review for misclassification. Manager dispatched. 30 feet away, Ms. Jordan Levin, a senior gate manager, had already changed course. By the time the agent reached for the radio, Jordan arrived. "Excuse me," Jordan said, stepping between the 2 women. "Can I help?" "She has a flagged wire." "Ma'am," Jordan said gently, turning to Maya. "May I see your ID?" Maya handed it over. Jordan read it, paused, then handed it back with both hands. "I apologize. This was a system flag, not a human one. But our response didn't meet protocol. That's on us." She turned to the agent. "From now on, when a federal Tier 2 clearance is shown, you do not proceed without management review. Understood?" The young agent nodded, face flushed. Meanwhile, in O'Hare's operations hub, a ping hit the back-end dashboard. AirScreen ethics trigger, resolved on-site, no external escalation required. User response time, 1 min 42 sec. Passenger impact, none. Apology issued. Public capture, 0. No one outside that gate ever knew. No tweets, no trending videos, no lawsuits. But in a quiet apartment in Houston, Naomi Elkins received a soft chime on her screen. She opened her terminal. One line flashed green, Gate C27. Simulation complete. System autocorrect successful. She smiled. It wasn't a simulation anymore. Later that night, Maya sat in her first-class seat, legs crossed, reading a book. A soft chime pinged her tablet. Not from the airline, from FedCom. A secure DOJ-linked portal. The message read, "Passenger event flag acknowledged. Internal system resolution successful. No action required. Ethics alert issued and recorded in staff performance audit. Timestamp 1403 CST." She exhaled. She hadn't filed anything, but someone had built a system that filed itself when people didn't. She looked out the window, heart quiet, mind steady. Not everything had to be a fight anymore. The next morning, at FAA HQ in DC, a small ethics team reviewed the system report. No one raised alarms, no angry calls, just a new notation. Tier 2 autocorrection success. Response time, benchmark, updated. The software engineer overseeing the AirScreen feedback loop scribbled a note in the margin. First confirmed field event where reform beat virality. 3 blocks away, Naomi sat across from a new partner at a coffee shop. "You don't want press?" the woman asked. "No," Naomi said, sipping her espresso. "I want the press to have nothing to chase." The AirScreen system kept updating silently. 14 false escalation events de-escalated before passenger stress levels spiked. 9 crew incidents flagged internally and corrected before takeoff. 6 manager interventions with apology issued within 3 minutes. 0 viral videos. In one of the FAA training classrooms, Cassie Rowe pulled up the Maya Whitmore report during an ethics lecture. "No one got famous, no one got fired. That's the dream," she told the class. One student raised their hand. "So, we'll never know who fixed it?" Cassie smiled. "That's the point. The fix isn't a hero, it's a habit." Naomi watched the training session remotely later that evening. Cassie's face looked confident, steady. She paused the video on that sentence. "The fix isn't a hero, it's a habit." Then typed a note into her private ethics log. "Let the system become the response, not the apology." A week later, a white paper was released internally at FAA. Behavioral Response Time versus Public Capture Risk, the case of C27. It included charts, no names, no blame, just timelines. The final section read, "The incident at Gate C27 marks a moment when reform quietly succeeded. No footage needed, no outrage required. The system spoke before injustice did." Naomi never replied to the internal thank you. She never attended the follow-up debrief. But in the final back-end update, she typed only one line into the system notes. "That's what we were building for." 1 year later, FAA National Training Center, Atlanta. Cassie Rowe stood at the front of a sleek, glass-paneled classroom. The screen behind her displayed a single phrase: "Dignity isn't what you say after, it's what you protect before." 20 new trainees sat in uniform. Some were barely out of college. Others had transferred from older regional airlines. All of them were now part of the post-AirScreen era. Cassie tapped her tablet, launching a recorded case study. Footage rolled silently. Gate C27, a flag, a fast response, no escalation. When the video ended, she turned to the room. "What did you not see?" A woman in the front row raised her hand. "No one yelling, no one filming." Cassie nodded. "Exactly. No one got humiliated." Another trainee asked, "How many times has that happened now?" Cassie smiled. "Hundreds, quietly." Outside that room, somewhere far from Atlanta, Naomi Elkins was gone. No official departure, no resignation letter, no feature in Forbes or Fast Company. She simply never logged back into the system again. Her last entry, over a year ago, was a 5-word line typed into the AirScreen backend. "It works. I can leave." Despite her absence, the system thrived. 98% of flagged ethics alerts now resolved before takeoff. Apologies issued by staff within 2.2 minutes of trigger. 74% drop in discrimination-related passenger complaints. And perhaps most importantly, 0 public scandals in 9 months. Airlines quietly rebranded their diversity training into ethics prevention labs, based on the mandate Naomi helped write, without her name ever being attached to the public documentation. She didn't care. She didn't need credit. Cassie, now FAA's lead instructor for passenger ethics integration, carried the torch. In her final module, she displayed a slide with no text, only an outline of a woman standing at a boarding gate. The same woman from Gate E7, the moment before everything changed. A trainee in the back raised his hand. "Why don't we ever talk about the woman who wrote all this?" Cassie paused, then walked to the center of the room. She didn't want you to memorize her name. She wanted you to recognize her silence, the way she stood still, the way she didn't defend herself. That was the blueprint. The room went quiet. Then Cassie added, "She's in the system now, in the way your tablet alerts you, in the way your supervisor knows to step in the fact that you're here, learning this at all. She doesn't need to walk in for you to notice her. You already did." After class, Cassie sat alone in the break room. She pulled out a worn envelope from her bag, one she kept but never opened in front of anyone. Inside was a single printed screenshot from a year ago. It showed the first ever AirScreen flag. Time, 14:03 siesta. Location, Gate C27. Passenger, Whitmore, Maya. Trigger, misidentification risk. Resolution, apology issued. Escalation prevented. At the bottom, Naomi's signature appeared only once, not as author, not as employee, but as system override approver. Outside, the aviation world had changed, but not because of new slogans or shiny brochures. It changed because systems were forced to pause before harm. Because one woman walked away from the spotlight to make the code work without her. Because justice didn't need applause to matter. On a new flight a week later, a teen girl was about to be moved for rebalancing reasons. AirScreen blinked yellow. The supervisor read the alert, apologized, reassigned the other passenger. No one raised a voice. No one pressed record. And the girl never knew how close she came to injustice, or how many layers were now in place to stop it. In the shadows of every gate, in the silent pause before reaction, Naomi still moved. Quiet, unseen, present, always. Tallahassee Regional Airport, Gate A12. A new name had started showing up on regional routes. Bright Star Aviation, slick branding, modern interiors, cheap upgrade perks. But behind the scenes, their ethics score always hovered a little too perfectly. 0 violations, all metrics green, no anomalies. Too good to be true. And to Jordan Reyes, a 28-year-old compliance trainee on contract with the FAA, something didn't add up. She wasn't just any trainee. She had completed Cassie Rowe's program 8 months earlier and remembered one rule Cassie hammered in. If the numbers look spotless, dig deeper. That day, while auditing Brightstar's recent AirScreen submissions, Jordan spotted it. A series of ethics logs, time-stamped during boarding sequences, all marked, resolved internally, no passenger impact. The problem? 4 of those reports had identical metadata, same response time, same staff ID, same wording, copy-paste ethics. Jordan didn't make a scene. She didn't blow a whistle in the hallway. Instead, she used what Cassie taught her. She logged a silent watch alert, a confidential ethics anomaly tag that flags the system without triggering alarms. Within 24 hours, the FAA Ethics Division received a discreet inquiry. Within 48 hours, Brightstar's clean slate had cracks. The twist. Brightstar had been replacing actual passenger alerts with dummy reports, training staff to report fake, positive interactions while suppressing flagged events to maintain their ethics rating. It wasn't sloppy. It was strategic. But they underestimated 2 things. The auto-mirroring backup AirScreen silently installed in all FAA-mandated gates, and people like Jordan who remembered why this mattered. Back in D.C., Cassie read the report with a clenched jaw. She didn't explode, didn't demand firings. She scheduled a secure video call with Jordan. "You didn't leak it?" Cassie said. Jordan nodded. "No, ma'am. I just didn't look away." Cassie smiled softly. That's the line. Not all heroes stand up. Some just keep watching until someone else can't lie anymore. Within a week, Brightstar's ethics score dropped from 92.4 to 38.7. 6 execs were placed on compliance hold. 4 managers suspended. The FAA froze Brightstar's eligibility for federal route incentives pending review, but no press release was issued, no viral video, because the system had acted before the public ever found out. Later, in a closed-door debriefing, one FAA official muttered, "We finally saw it, the system's immune response." Someone else added, and it wasn't code, it was conviction. That same day, Jordan got an unsigned envelope in her locker. Inside was a folded note card with only 5 words. "You watched, so it worked." There was no signature, just the faint watermark of a boarding gate, E7. She didn't need to ask who it was from. 3 days later, Cassie stood in front of another ethics class, holding up Jordan's case. She didn't name names, she just said, "Someone noticed the silence wasn't honest." And instead of making noise, she gave the system a chance to speak first. That's the future, when ethics no longer needs defending, just witnessing. Meanwhile, Brightstar scrambled to cover its tracks. Their PR team offered donation pledges, equity training accelerators, staff awards, but no one bought it, because now AirScreen had history and a record and eyes inside. For the first time, the public didn't have to get angry, because someone inside had already made it right. And in a small apartment in Houston, a deactivated terminal screen remained dark. Naomi never logged back in. She didn't have to. The system had grown teeth and guardians. Washington, D.C., U.S. Department of Transportation Auditorium, 8:00 a.m. 1 year later. No red carpet, no balloons, just rows of sharp suits and weary eyes, and a giant federal seal on the stage backdrop. Ethics before access. This wasn't a party. It was a reckoning. For the first time in U.S. aviation history, every domestic airline was about to be legally bound to comply with the AirScreen Ethics Mandate. No more optional training. No more PR-driven workshops. No more burying complaints. This was the moment the industry bent, not from scandal, but from structure. Cassie Rowe stood backstage, adjusting the collar of her blazer. She didn't look nervous. She looked ready. The FAA chair leaned over and whispered, "You sure you want to say the last part?" Cassie didn't hesitate. She earned it. On stage, representatives from the DOT, FAA, Department of Justice, Veterans Affairs, and Federal Ethics Council lined the table. Beside them, executives from 11 major airlines, none smiling. This wasn't about applause. It was about compliance. At 8:36 a.m., the FAA administrator lifted the pen and signed the charter. Then the ripple began. One by one, airline CEOs followed suit. Some looked ashamed. Some resigned inside, but all of them signed. By 8:48 a.m., the AirScreen Ethics Mandate became law. A staffer approached the podium. "Now speaking lead ethics integration instructor Cassie Rowe." The room clapped, lightly, formally. Cassie stepped forward and let the silence settle before she spoke. "We were late. That's the truth. This system, the one we just signed into law, should have been written a decade ago. We knew what was happening. We saw it. The forced removals, the random extra screenings, the humiliations in silence, the way some people had to prove they belonged in their seat, over and over again. And we taught people to file reports, to de-escalate, after the harm had already happened. We were late, but someone, one person, didn't wait for permission. She didn't file complaints. She didn't write essays. She just wrote code. Not the kind that goes viral. The kind that stops injustice before it happens. She gave us a system that doesn't need to guess what's right. It just knows what's wrong. And today, we made it law." She let the pause breathe, then looked up, eyes sharp. "Some of you might ask, why wasn't she here today? My answer is simple. She never left." She's here, in the protocol that prevents escalation, in the algorithm that detects bias, in the apology you now give before a lawyer has to ask. Cassie then tapped her tablet and pulled up one slide. Black background, white text. The audience read in silence. "Build the system so even the wrong person has to stop. N.E." A hush fell over the room. Even the airlines didn't blink. Afterward, in a quiet hallway, one young executive, newly promoted at Sky North, approached Cassie. "She really wrote all of this?" Cassie nodded. She wrote the part that mattered. The exec hesitated. "Do you think she ever watches these things?" Cassie smiled softly. "If she does, she's not looking for her name." Meanwhile, in a small cafe in Roanoke, Virginia, a woman sat by the window, drinking coffee, laptop closed. Her phone buzzed once. A friend forwarded her a clip. Cassie's speech, the final slide. Naomi Elkins smiled. Just a little. then locked the screen and returned to her quiet. 3 weeks later, LAX International Terminal. A gate agent hesitated while eyeing an elderly man in a worn army jacket. AirScreen blinked yellow. The agent checked the log, then smiled and said, "Sir, would you like a seat closer to the window?" The man blinked, surprised, but nodded. 4 days later, Chicago. O'Hare. A black teenager was seated near the exit row. A new trainee whispered, "I thought they had to be 18. The supervisor checked AirScreen, flagged the note, and replied, "She is 18, and she's already passed safety clearance." The trainee backed off. No one moved her. 5 months later, a new flight, a new face. Jordan Reyes now ran internal audits for 3 regional carriers. She didn't lead with her title. She led with one question: do your systems serve dignity or just delay liability? They never had a good answer. Across the country, ethics shifted. Not because people got better, but because the system forced them to pause. And in every terminal, every crew room, every decision whispered in a headset. Naomi's presence lingered, unseen, uncredited, uncompromised. The last scene zooms out. A woman boards a flight. She isn't famous. She isn't VIP. She's just not kicked out for her backpack. Because now the system asks a different question. Not, who are you? But, are we treating you right? And that changed everything. Naomi never came back for credit, but the whole world now runs on what she left behind. Have you ever done something good and walked away knowing that was enough? Drop your thoughts in the comments and tell us where you're watching from.